Metal to the masses. Yeah, we're going to cover that topic because why not? So, we have talked about Metal to the Masses. We talked about, I think we were at the quarterfinal, semi-final stage. We did a kind of roundup of the bands and stuff. So we're not talking about the bands here. We want to talk about the actual contest itself as a whole. I don't actually know how many locations around the country there are. I should really have found that out, but there's a lot. There's a hell of a lot. It must be, 30, 35, 40, something like that. The amount of people that are on the New Blood stage. And I think as a whole, the contest is a great idea. There's no other festival out there that does something like this that can put that many bands on. So Metal to the Masses, great event. Well worth being in there for the bands to take part. Obviously, Metal to the Masses Hitchin is the one we're talking about. So the first thing I've got to say is it was the first year without Nick Clues being kind of key behind it. So we've got David Himbury, we have Cassie, we had Danny. Obviously, we've got Bob. We have the guys. So with Josh on lights, Alex, Sticks, Ruben. Who else have we got? I think if I've missed anyone, sorry. The guys behind the bar that keep you, the people downstairs do the tickets, guys on security, and of course Larry the Larry.
That's Big Vinny.
Yes, so we have all those. I think they did a great job this year. There were some challenges early on with who was taking the reins on it, but they all pulled together really well this year and put on a great show. We've had the experience of going through it with them for all 16 weeks in total. I think it goes for. There's a week off in there as well, but 16 weeks total runtime. And we've spoken to the bands, we've experienced stuff. I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about sort of the elements of the setup, what we thought about it. Is there ways that might have worked better based on feedback from bands, what we've experienced? And we have no impact on the Metal to the Masses. We have no impact on how Hitchin does it. So all we can do is give our feedback, and they can obviously take it, leave it, do something with it, or just continue doing whatever they want to do if that's what they want to show us. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about. Obviously, the first thing we've got is we have 8 heats, which I think is more than most of the other regions, it feels like. I don't remember when I've looked at them, a lot of them don't do 8 heats. And for me, 8 heats felt a lot this year, especially as we didn't always have 4 bands on every heat. I don't know if there's a way. It makes sense to do 8 if you have 4 bands, because then you know that you've got 2 bands from each. That then gives you your 16 for your quarterfinals. That then gives you your 8 for your semis, and that gives you your 4. So it's an easy mathematical way of doing it. But I don't know if there's a way of reducing it down to maybe 3 bands and 6 heats. So slightly less bands playing, which might make more sense, and maybe do something along the lines of 1 band goes through and then they total up the scores for the second place. And then maybe a selection of the highest scoring second places go through, something like that. So you makes up the numbers and have slightly less. I don't know what your thoughts on it. Maybe it was right, 8 heats at 4 bands a night is right if we can get enough bands. What's your thought, Andy?
It has always been the format, but I think you're right. Around the country, I don't think they do that, FA Cup style.
Yeah.
Round of 32, 16, 8, and your semis and whatever. So they may well do something similar, different number of bands per heat, not even heats, for example, and maybe, as you say, have sort of high scoring second place bands progressing. How they then inform the bands at the end of the show, at the end of the sort of first round of shows, I don't know. But I think when we were talking before, we were kind of struggling, thinking, are they going to fit all the slots? And I think, as you rightly said, I know Heat 1 certainly only had 3. I'm sure another one of the early heats only had 3.
There was at least 2. There was at least 3 of the nights did only have 3, I think.
Yeah.
Which a lot of bands that had 4 bands playing felt a little bit done out by, because they were like, hang on, well, that's a bit of a mistake. We've had 4 of us on our heat. They had 3, so there's a much better chance of the 2 bands going through. They only have
mathematically, regardless of your own performance, you've got a better chance, haven't you? I mean, that's the argument we've always had. I've said this as well. You take the 32 bands that, if all the heats were complete and you got 32 bands, and you sort of split them to the ones that progressed to quarters and the ones that didn't. That's not necessarily, no disrespect to anybody, I'm not going to name any names, but that may not be the best 16 bands that progress. It
Yeah.
does all depend on who you're drawing against, the judges on the night. Like you just said, Dave, whether you're fortunate or unfortunate enough to have a 3-band bill. It's a difficult one. I'd like them to continue in that format, but is it going to be as easy to fill those slots? I think there was a little bit of a struggle this year, as we saw.
Because that's the other question is also with the amount of bands that you then have within our current scene. If so, this year we had bands that didn't come back from the previous year. I'm fairly certain there'll be bands that competed this year that probably won't come back next year because they've done it for a couple of years in a row and they now don't want to. They want to move on and do something different.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't feel that way and they feel still. They might just treat it. A lot of bands do. They go, well, it's a gig. It's a chance to play a show at Club 85. So they may look at it that way. But if those bands that I can think of, at least 4 or 5, decide we're not going to do the Metal to the Masses, I don't know of any young bands that I've heard of that are going to come in and fill those ranks.
Yeah,
which is a bit of a worry.
Yeah, I agree on that, Dave. I was just going to say, this is the irony, isn't it? The standard of musicianship these days is so high. And think back to the late 90s, if you had Metal to the Masses, there just wouldn't be enough bands to actually participate, even though they'd just be playing Nirvana and Green Day and bands like that, really easy stuff on guitar. That music wasn't as popular, was it? And
right,
now,
okay.
like, look at the bands who are in this. Probably 90% of them are real top-class musicians. And I'm not saying music needs to be about the virtuoso leanings of the musician, but just what you said makes sense to me. We don't know of anyone coming through, do we? And there are going to be 5 or 6 who've done it 2 years in a row. I think they're right to drop out. Why bother doing it? So I think it might be inevitable that they have to reduce it. We are fortunate that there are so many great bands around, but that cannot continue because the level of musicianship is so high. Often there's 5 people in these bands. They've all got lives. They all have day jobs, families to look after. It's not easy, is it? So I'm just impressed that Hitchin has got such a high standard for the region of Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire. It even takes in some of Buckinghamshire and London, doesn't it, and Essex. But yeah, I'd be surprised if we can continue at this standard. And this year, as you pointed out, Heat 1 and 2, there were only 3 bands in it. So I wouldn't look at it as, okay, we need to have 16 bands. Is it 32 bands? Sorry, how many?
It's 32 in the Heat, 16, 8, and then 4.
Yeah, so maybe unless they get overwhelming interest, maybe reduce it from 32.
But also, you don't necessarily need to do do you need to do Heats, quarterfinal, semi-final, final? Can you not do Heats, semi-final, final? If you reduce the amount of bands playing, you don't need. So my headspace with this was when I was thinking about this is, do you go down
8
to
winners,
6?
Dave? Is that what you mean?
Huh?
8 heat winners.
You could either do 8 Heat winners and then go to.
Then you can reduce the number of bands. You could have like 3, couldn't you? 3 times 8 is 24. Yeah, you could do it that way.
You could do it that way, or you could do 6 heats, fill those up with 3 bands each, and then you'd have 2 spare weeks that if you had enough interest, you could expand it and put some 2 extra nights on.
Good idea.
You fill the first 6. You have 2 weeks off. There could be a local metal show on in between of bands that are not involved in it, if you really wanted to, or you have that facility to expand out. Rather than going, we've got 8 weeks, 4 bands a night, we've got to fill. And if we don't, then... So here's a question. When there was 4 bands on, and when there was 3 bands on, what was the price of the ticket? Did it change? So when we had an opener, why did the price of the ticket go up then?
Are you talking about the semi-final?
Yeah. So, no, I know, because this was something that we looked at. So the price of the ticket, if it was £8 at the start, and there was a headliner plus 3 bands, and it was £8 the next week when there was 4 bands and a headliner. Why, when they had an opener, did they change it to £10? Shouldn't you have got a £2 discount then when there was only 3 bands playing? So I'm being pedantic here, Club 85. I'm sorry.
There's £2 value these days. You'll get 2 Mars bars.
I understand it's money. You have to cover costs. I get it. So
Andy, go on. You what was your thoughts on the semi-final uplift in price for the ticket?
You're paying £2 to see again, no disrespect to the bands you're opening, but I just thought that was a bit of a shock, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it's £2, but eight, like you say, you could have offset that against the weeks where you paid full price and only saw 3 competing bands. But
yeah, I mean, I only just thought of that as we started that conversation.
First semi-final, I've paid like £2 to see them young people in Vendetta, and they're good and they're entertaining, but that should be like the freebie, the thanks for the support in the competition so far kind of thing, you know.
Yeah. Let's talk about...
I like, you know, I know it's my idea, and if anybody else come over, I think it was a good idea. But I liked it when they introduced the sort of season ticket.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A fixed price, and I think you got the 8 heats and the quarters for a fixed price. And for somebody who goes to most of them, I thought that was a good idea and a really good deal. And you got some money up front to invest in the competition if that's what you need to do. You know, put it in the pot so you can sort of attract some headliners later on in the competition. But yes, that's my thoughts on that. Saves finding money each week when you've already sort of you know, putting the outlay out earlier on or before the competition starts, and you're actually making a bit of a saving. And it does kind of make you want to go as well, because if you don't buy a ticket, you don't have to go. If you bought a ticket in advance or you bought a season pass, you think, oh, I ought to go along, really. I paid for this.
So that's the other question. You've actually raised a good point there. Advance tickets versus on-the-door tickets. The difference is, what, about 30p, isn't it?
If you buy one, you're saving 30p, yeah.
So that's something that really... if I was personally Club 85, I'd put the price of the on-door price up. Make it more of an incentive for people. I wouldn't reduce the advance price. I think the advance price is probably right because they've got to cover a certain amount. But then just make it a tenner for on the door. Make it £6 in advance and £10 on the door. People are more likely to go, actually, do you know what? Yeah, we will buy the on the advance ticket because it's more worthwhile. Because I now, even for local gigs and stuff, I do check it out for like the 66 bar and the Corn Exchange. And I'm like, tickets in advance plus the fees. And then I look at door price. And yeah, if it's about 50p difference and stuff, I'm like, there's no point doing the advance. I'll just do it on the door. But if there's a significant potential saving, makes it much more worthwhile for me to buy in advance. So I don't understand why we're not seeing that from Club 85 to try and incentivize people to do the advance. Probably I think they're worried that if they put the door price up too high, they'll scare people off. But I'm like, well, that should encourage them to buy in advance if they're going to come. I want to move on to headliners. So our thoughts around headliners, because we actually had some great bands this year across all the heats. But I did get this vibe, and I did notice it a lot myself, that during the headliner set, a lot of people were outside. The headliners always played to the fewest amount of people. People sort of drifted back in again halfway through the set, and it was usually just, what we found was all the people that came to support the bands, fans, all left, and just the bands seemed to remain to watch the headliner, because
it's a real shame, isn't it? Because, you know,
there's a shame to that, yeah.
They're usually the people who've travelled the furthest, been waiting around the longest to play, and they're rewarded with not a great turnout, which is a real shame.
But what's the point of the headliners? Because they wasn't always a headliner for these. This is only something that's been coming out for a few years now. That prior to about, I don't know, 3 years ago or something like that, there was only headliners for the semi-finals and the final, I believe. And then before that, there was never a headliner. So I've been sitting there racking my brains, and I thought the whole idea about bringing the headliners in was, I know it's while they're counting, it's to give entertainment while there's counting going on. But I always thought the idea of the headline act is the headliner is meant to bring the bulk of the crowd. It's meant to be like a big that people are coming to see your headline act, and I haven't really seen that. I've seen people come down, and headliners have brought people, but probably fewer than the actual competing bands, because obviously they're trying to get the crowd feedback, they're trying to get that response. And I don't know if that's a case of bands playing too many shows locally, so it's bands that we've seen and you saw them 2 weeks ago down the road or whatever it might be, and so they're not really getting it, or then maybe they're not pushing it as a big deal that they're playing it. Or do we need headliners in the heats and just bring the headliners in from the quarters, the semis and the finals? I don't know. I have my own personal viewpoint on it, and that would be not having headliners during the heats. I think keep it simple.
Yeah.
Just have DJ music on. Get the
which is always popular. I mean, I remember they used to mix up a bit. They used to have like a dance half hour, and people were loving it. Josh puts his strobes on, and people are throwing shapes to dance music while they're counting the votes, and that gives you a chance to go outside and chat, which is always an aspect of the Club 85, which I haven't really experienced this year, because between acts we were early on doing our little feedback videos. Every headliner I watched as well, support them, whereas a lot of people are taking that opportunity to go outside and socialise. So I think I agree with you. Keep some really big headliners, the best we can get for the semis and the final, and perhaps don't worry about the early part of the competition. Have a disco.
Because I had a notice, I can't remember where it was. It was in the quarterfinals, I think. And I think maybe it was Sticks on sound. And what he did was, in between bands, he didn't crank the music. He had the music, but he didn't crank it too loud. So what you found was everyone was staying inside, just chatting. Because you could actually stand in there, have a beer, have the music on the background, and still talk. But a lot of the time, the music's being cranked so loud, you're like, hang on, what was that? Hang on, let's go outside and have a chat. And so everyone is leaving, so they can catch up with the friends, because you can't hear yourself in there. And I think maybe between bands, if they actually brought the levels down a little bit.
That's a great point, yeah.
People wouldn't bugger off outside and would be there when the band started, because they were actually still inside, still communicating, still chatting with their friends, rather than having to all leave. The amount of times I've popped out in between bands, and you're like swaves of people outside, and not really anyone's really smoking or vaping. They're just going outside so they can hear each other.
I would keep the headliners. I think the question, the way you phrased it, was why do we have headliners? I'll use an analogy. Print media, screen blast repeat, online, I do music reviews. Why bother writing music reviews? An algorithm on Spotify could do a job probably even better of recommending an artist that you like based on an album. And the way I look at one, I enjoy doing the writing because that's what I want to improve at. But the musicians need it as well. It doesn't mean you're ever enthralled to the musicians and should always give positive reviews, but they might have reaction videos on YouTube and they might have live video footage, but in an electronic press kit, you do need someone to articulate what they think of your music. So I find often it's good for me that I get to meet these people like we do with A.D.K. Are people reading it? Probably not. So with the headliners, really, that is us giving a leg up to local bands, helping out musicians. Everyone wants a gig if you're an active band. So it's just one way of giving back. So I don't know if we're even expecting them to bring an audience. Maybe, Dave, we need to change the name headliner. I know we use the term guest headliner. Maybe just call it special guests, even though they're on last. Because there is a lot of pressure when you're saying headliner, and then the floor is emptied by 40%. It might be a bit demoralizing that for the band. So maybe just change the name of it just to special guest rather than headliner. But I would, keep them on there. We want as many bands as possible before we reach saturation point, and we're doing a good thing here. It's a win-win situation for the music lover and for the local musicians as well.
The only other thing I would raise on headliners or special guests, this is just a feedback on this one, is if it's a 3:30 load-in, your band needs to be there by 3:30, all of them. So I was there for every single sound check, and a lot of them started late because the special headlining act who have to sound check first weren't all there. The other bands were all there, and we couldn't start the sound check until the headliners got on there. So definitely, if it's 3:00, 3:30, and you're not there, then as a headliners, you forfeit your sound check. Sorry, bye. Get the next band on. And I think the Club 85 just need to be firmer on that. I was surprised at how lenient they were. I know everyone doesn't like rocking the boat. Maybe I'm just a bit of a git who doesn't mind antagonizing people, but it annoyed a lot of the other bands because some bands got a very, very quick 5-minute sound check literally before they could go on. They're like, right, sorry, you've got enough time, just plug it in. We'll sort your levels out once we start playing, which is not fair for competing bands. That they had to do that with the headliners were fucking around for an hour. So that's my only thought on that. I had 2 other topics to cover from this in the interest of time. I've got 8 minutes to cover. In fact, actually, no, I've only got 1 topic. So I don't know. This could be fine. I don't know. Judges. We had obviously a lot of different judges this year, which is great. Lots of people getting involved. But do we think? I think there was always 3 different judges each week, and we've just had a conversation about musical tastes. That's a big thing in your life. So if for instance, you've got to ask the judge to be completely neutral, and it's very hard. Not everyone's going to be able to be very neutral about music, even if they're not intentionally trying to be like judgmental. You're going to be saying in the back of your head that you prefer one band over the other. I mean, even me and you, Kirk, when we did our scoring, we gave different scores to the bands because we've got personal different tastes. Now, we both talked about it. I think we had the Velor Fog Heat and a Killer was in there, and we were both scoring, and we'd scored them slightly different, but we did discuss our scores about why we had scored them differently because we had differences of opinions. But the problem is you've got 8 heats, quarterfinals, semi-finals, all with judges making decisions, different judges each week. Some of them the headlining bands, some of the others. Should there be a simply put 2 judges for the whole contest plus 1 guest judge is my thought. Would there be 2 people that are consistently going to be, and it shouldn't really be the guys like David, Cassie, or Danny, the guys that are organising. They should not have to be put in that position. Could they not get 2 people that work either or have involvement within the industry that can be shown to be neutral, that have not been like, oh, we're really into doom and sludge and we really don't like hard rock, we've got a thing about that? And should that be the way that this should go? And then you've got a guest judge separate, the making up the third part. Is that more of a sensible way to do it rather than having varying judges? I don't know. You might think it's better to have lots of different judges. Throw that to you two.
I agree, Dave, but finding 2 people to take on that role, I think would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Not just for us here in Hitchin, but if they rolled that out to every competition around the country, they'd find it very difficult. But I think that'd be the dream format, wouldn't it? So the 2 people that are there every heat, who've seen every band with the same objective view, and maybe someone from the headlining band or guest band who've got it, or somebody else who could make that trio up. But great idea, very difficult to put in practice, I think. But that'd be what I would like to see in place. You got that consistency then, haven't you?
So Stephen from Strangers made a point about for other places they play, for one of the promoters they work with, the guy always pops outside just before the band's about to play to encourage people inside. They should do like, what they do in like theatres when they have intermissions. They should have a bell or something that tells you the band's about to start playing. Or even they just close the front doors and they're like, right, we're closing it for this band. And then just, you're outside for the next half an hour if you don't come in and watch this band, sort of thing. We're closing the bar on you. They should do something.
It's probably something just to do that, just an announcer, someone to round up everybody. Because you do get engaged in conversation. You do lose track of time, especially if they're a little bit off the clock.
Yeah.
If the band's not due to start at 1:45 the hour that they should do, and it's more like going to be like 10:10, you as a partner might miss that start. So somebody nipping out and saying, right, next band's on in 2 minutes, get yourself inside is not a bad idea as well.
Okay, well that wraps up our feedback on Metal to the Masses. Hopefully,
about judges, Kirk, before we move on, Dave?
No, he doesn't get an opinion. No.
Okay.
No, of course you do, Kirk. Go on, get 1 minute. What do you reckon on the judges format?
You just fear that you could have 3 judges who are all into one narrow subgenre of metal and rock, and they're judging bands outside the comfort zone. So I understand that there's a potential risk there, and it will be difficult. You just need somebody who's got good knowledge of all parts of the rock and metal spectrum. I don't know if you can be objective. It'd be very difficult for me if Scarlet Envy were playing Sentient and all these bands that I like, and I had to choose 2 of them. You almost feel like you've got some loyalty to some of them because they're friends. So it's going to be hard to eliminate that. But it's probably a sensible idea to have the same 2, at least for the heats, with 1 guest, and then try and change it the same 2 for the quarters. Sorry, a different 2 for the quarters, different 2 for the semis, and then obviously the finals.
You can have continuity though. So if, for instance, in the heats, all of the hardcore bands got knocked out, for instance, you might go to the judge and go, hang on. do you not like hardcore or something? Because you just knocked all of them out for some reason.
Yeah.
But you put through all the hard rock bands or something along those. Then you would, because at the moment with the different judges, it's very hard to work out if there has been any inconsistencies. Now, I don't think there was this year. Looking at who went through, there was a couple of question mark ones, which we were like a bit surprised. But when we talk about those bands, we can kind of understand some unique factors that may have been the reason behind it. And also the audience votes do take a big swing of that in the early stages. So that makes a lot more sense. But I still generally think that having consistency means that if there was a challenge about a band being knocked out or something, or not going through, when they've brought loads and loads and loads of people down and they've not gone through, and then you find out the judges gave them a really low score, and you could actually go and look at that and challenge. Now, I know they can do it now, but having that easy constrict, you can't then say, oh, if I'd had that judge last week, I would have definitely gone through, sort of thing. There's that consistency in that element, but I don't know if it's even going to be feasible. But anyway, we must end the stream. So if you liked our video today, please do like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you on the video sometime very soon. Bye bye.